years, we've heard about the so-called semigration trend in South Africa, a trend whereby significant numbers of often highly skilled, high-income and affluent people have been migrating from inland regions in South Africa, such as Johannesburg and Gauteng, to the very popular Western Cape region in the southwest of the country. And of course, we had become a little bit concerned a number of years ago that perhaps some of them might choose to do so by bicycle, or want to do so by bicycle, either to save petrol or to save the planet, and may not have a suitable route to do so. So in April 2021, we introduced the so-called Joburg to Bloberg 1,000-mile challenge route, and the inaugural ride was undertaken by myself and my riding mate, Paul Erasmus. Many riders have since followed us down this popular route, ending in Bloberg Beach in full view of South Africa's beautiful Table Mountain. But of course, this posed the next question. Once you get to Cape Town, what do you do? What do you do to stop getting bored? And so, almost 3 years later, after the first Joburg to Bloberg 1,000-mile ride, we introduced to you the Western Cape 50 Passes 1,000-miler challenge. We would suggest to these semigrants that find themselves in the Western Cape that perhaps the thing to do is to mount your bike and do a little loop, a little 1,000-mile loop of some of the really beautiful parts of the lovely Western Cape province. That ought to keep you from getting bored. On 11th of December 2023, John Loos, yours truly that is, and Becky Sands from Durban undertook the inaugural Western Cape 50 Passes 1,000-miler ride. We started at 4 a.m. from Wellington NG Church, and of course we ended there 11 days, 11 hours and 42 minutes later. That was the start to finish. But of course the route is a loop, so if you wish to undertake this challenge at any time in future, you can start and finish at any point on the route, as long as it's the same. The finish point is the same as where you started. It is a 1,627.5 kilometer loop, and the objective of the loop, apart from being a 1,000-mile route, or 1 plus minus 1,600 kilometers, was that it should be within the Western Cape province, but also that it should have many of the best mountain passes that the province has to offer. There's nothing flat really about this route. It's a lot of climbing. It should also, we also tried to include some of the iconic touristy spots as well along the way, and some of the key mountain ranges too, which one would expect if you're trying to get all the passes in. There are actually 53 passes along this, although we call it the Western Cape 50 Passes 1,000-miler. There are 53 passes to be more precise, along with some lovely touristy spots which we'll name, and really vibey touristy towns which one finds in the Western Cape. There's also included in the route a high amount of good, quiet gravel roads. The roads in the province generally in great condition by South African standards. There is a significant amount of tar. It's unavoidable sometimes when you get nearer to Cape Town in some of the beautiful spots such as the winelands, but as far as possible we've tried to make it quieter tar roads too. The vertical ascent is 23,390 meters in total. That's significantly more than the Joburg to Bloberg 1,000-miler, where you get just over 10,000 meters of vertical ascent. So it gives you an idea. There's a lot more climbing on this route than on the Joburg to Bloberg. The most significant mountain passes of those 53, I would say, are Baines Kloof to start with, an old pass of the famous pass builder Andrew Gettysbane, one of the first passes over the mountains from the Cape Town side to the hinterland to carry traffic to upcountry destinations. There are the beautiful rock formations of Seweweekspoort and Meyringspoort included in this trip. The highest pass is Swartberg Pass, spectacular zigzags going down into Prince Albert, 838 meters of vertical ascent, making it the 9th biggest pass in South Africa in terms of total vertical ascent. We also include Prince Albert Pass or Prince Alfred Pass on this trip. It's the longest pass at 68.5 kilometers in the country. The Montague Pass up from George over the mountains to Oudtshoorn, which is the oldest unaltered pass in the country, a beautiful old gravel road pass. And then of course there's Franschhoek Pass, which deserves mention as being the oldest properly engineered pass according to Mountain Passes of South Africa website. There's very little flat on this route, as I've mentioned. It's mainly about climbing, but there is a very flat section, the Tanqua Karoo crossing from Hartneck's Kloof, as you emerge from the Cederberg into the Tanqua, all the way to the Lord Milner Hotel at Matjiesfontein. A 132 kilometer stretch, almost flat as a pancake, very little shade. We had to take a break in the searing heat of over 40 degrees under a road bridge. That was the only shade we could find along that section of route. No resupply. We had to go to farms to pick up some extra water. That was the only real flat section on the whole race, was that 132 Tanqua Karoo stage. And the contrasts in vegetation are nothing short of stunning. From the very dry and barren, almost semi-desert Tanqua Karoo to the very dense, dark, thick Knysna forest just outside Knysna. So there are beautiful contrasts in vegetation along the way. The scenery highlights were numerous. 3 of the key mountain ranges included in this trip on this Western Cape 50 passes 1,000 mile included the Cederberg, the Swartberg, and the Outeniqua mountains. The Cederberg especially spectacular, a very popular getaway and tourist destination for Western Cape inhabitants. Then there's the Knysna forest, which needs no introduction. Absolutely beautiful, something totally unique in the dry and generally less bush dense South Africa. The Seweweekspoort and Meyringspoort rock formations, absolutely spectacular. And then, of course, the Cape Winelands as well, a real tourist destination, not only for locals but foreigners. The route ends off with a ride through some of those towns of Franschhoek, Stellenbosch and Paarl, including Paarl Mountain and its spectacular Big Paarl Rock. We go along the side of the mountain in the last pass on the way back to Wellington near the end. Farm valleys such as the Kamanassi Valley, very peaceful, quiet valleys, almost free of human habitation, or should I say very low density human habitation, and very, very low vehicle traffic. Oudtshoorn, the ostrich capital of the world, and then of course many touristy vibey towns along the way. Unlike the Joburg to Bloberg, we often go through a lot of dying, decaying Free State and Karoo towns. In the Western Cape, you generally get vibrant towns, thriving. They've reinvented themselves quite spectacularly in terms of touristy towns. And the tourist traffic in Prince Albert, for one, was in the Karoo was quite astounding to see in the main street when we got there on the one morning. The accommodation spots, it goes without saying that if it's a touristy route, then there's a lot of you would expect a lot of accommodation. Apart from, as I say, the Tanqua Karoo stretch, generally ample accommodation, not only in the towns but along the route on farms as well, such as the Seweweekspoort Road, such as the Matjies River area on the way to Swartberg Pass. So you have to look a bit closer at Google Earth or Google Maps, and then you see that there are accommodation options in between towns as well. The highlight undoubtedly for me was the Lord Milner Hotel at Matjiesfontein after that very hard Tanqua Karoo crossing day. It was the most expensive, almost 2,000 Rand for a room, but worth every cent after that hot day. And it's a historic old hotel. It was over 100 years ago used in the Anglo-Boer War as a British Army base temporarily. A lot of history to it. They say it's supposedly haunted from all the ghosts of the past, but when you're that tired as we were, you weren't about to be woken up by ghosts. But really a special place to stay the night and stay around for breakfast the next morning. We were in no rush to leave at our normal early time. It goes without saying too that it's a more touristy route, so accommodation is significantly more expensive than on the Joburg to Bloberg route. The cuisine as well is also far more than the normal garage pies on the other route. We, as a matter of fact, had very little in the way of garage pies. It was normally coffee milkshakes, cappuccinos, good cappuccinos, and really good cuisine along the way, proper meals. A lot of farm lodges too, as I've said, in between towns. So the route, generally speaking, apart from in the Tanqua Karoo, is littered with accommodation options in towns and in between towns. The technical support is limited in the first part of the route if one starts in Wellington. I had a spoke come loose and twist up in my chain and cause quite significant damage to the derailleur as well as buckling my wheel. Fortunately, we were able to bend things straight, not the wheel. But it could ride buckled. But there was some damage, and it was a bit fragile and risky to ride like that. And we had to ride all the way from the Cederberg where that happened, a few hundred kilometers to the first bike shop in Prince Albert, where Arno Buerta's Prince Albert Cycles could help me out with a new wheel. But after that, cycle shop options become more frequent when you get to Knysna and along the other side of the mountains nearer to the coast. You go through Swellendam and George and Greyton, and you find more frequent cycle shop options, but initially a little bit low on tech support. Wind we didn't have too much problem with. Now in summer in the Western Cape, the southeaster is often the prevailing wind, and it can be quite strong as well. So in the first part of the ride through the Cederberg, when we turned through the Cederberg and turned eastward through the Tanqua Karoo and through the Prince Albert and all the way to Uniondale, it could have been that we had a big southeaster headwind. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The southeaster was pretty lenient on us this time. When you turn at Knysna, obviously at this time of year in December, the wind can be in your favor a lot more often, the southeaster more at your back. The weather was dry and hot, extremely hot, often over 40 degrees Celsius, and we really suffered with that. We knew that was going to be the case though. The upside though of doing it at this time of year is the chances of rain are very remote, and indeed we had virtually no rain at all. Very dry roads, and that's the benefit of it. So you've got to take heat versus no rain, because Western Cape is a winter rainfall area, or you take rain in winter and you've got a lot cooler climate, but then it can become a bit of a mud bath. I would say that the optimal time to do this ride is probably not now in December like we did it, but probably during round about March and April, when the weather is significantly cooler, a good few degrees cooler, but at the same time you probably don't get the winter rains. On a normal winter, you haven't got the winter rains setting in severely yet, so you've probably still got dry roads. You probably won't battle with flooded rivers which may divert you, but it's a little bit cooler. So I'd say March, April is probably the optimal time to do this route. Resupply points were ample, generally speaking, apart from the Tanqua Karoo crossing from Hartnexkloof to Maatjiesfontein. There we did require the help of some generous farmers with water. Thinking records, if one looks at the fastest known time on the Joburg to Bloberg 1,000-mile route, it's sub 5 days, just under 5 days. I would say the equivalent of this on the Western Cape Passes route would probably be about sub 7 days, given that there's very significant extra climbing involved in this route. It's definitely not a flat route as the Joburg to Bloberg route could be labeled. That would be my guess, but of course I'd love to be proven right or proven wrong. It doesn't matter to me. I would love to see Racing Snakes come and show us what a racing time could be on this new 1,000-mile route.